So I've given you a lot to think about. You're having to think about everything in the context of complex adaptive systems, which means all elements are connected to all elements. We have to redefine risk, redefine return, redefine impact, find a way to have financial risk and return connect to impact risk and return. So I have a little shortcut for you. This is an image, a metaphor. It is not a quantitative measurement tool, but I think it'll be helpful in trying to see the relationships between financial and impact, risk, and return. So I call this the Impact Equalizer. Maybe some of you remember those old stereo equalizers, like the treble and the bass that you would run from like 0 up 10 or down 10. So that's the idea here. So we have the Impact Equalizer, and you have the finance metric. And then you have the ESG, the environmental, social, and governance metrics. And what we want to do is see them in relationship to each other. So we have the neutral level 0. And then I have at the top 100% positive, negative 100%. You could change the metrics on that. But what I want to do is look at a way of understanding our traditional investments and maybe some more grant type allocations and impact investments. So let's start by taking a look at a fossil fuel investment. Now, the time that I'm giving you this talk, there's the war in Ukraine, there's inflation. For better or for worse, the fossil fuel companies are outperforming the market. They've got, like, Exxon is the highest performer. And so imagine that you're investing in Exxon or another fossil fuel company, and you're saying, we're going to get outsized financial returns on this. But there's some risk depending on when I get into the market or, the chance that things could shift. So I'm just going to mark the possibility of getting a little bit of negative return and a lot of return. And so the two dots that you see on the ends of the line represent the maximum financial return and the minimum financial return. The amplitude of the line is the risk, right? So I don't know which one I'm going to get. But then we go over to the environmental dimension and we're like, yeah, that's really bad. We're going to get a pretty bad environmental return. And social return, what is this doing for people and communities? We're going to make it pretty bad, although some of them have some corporate social responsibility programs and they try to mitigate some of the harm that they do. So we'll just give them, maybe they'll do a little less bad than we think they will. So we'll give them a little kick there. And on governments, which is usually in the context of ESG investing, sometimes that means the composition of the board. It could mean a lot more than that, but that's often what it means. So maybe I've seen some things qualify as ESG investments because they added a woman to an otherwise all-male board. So we'll give them a little motion there. So this would be my map of a fossil fuel investment in terms of its risk and return against the multiple dimensions. And you can see that I am trading off my negative impact return with my positive financial return. And one of the invitations I like to offer people is you should map every single thing in your portfolio. So instead of just looking at your impact investments, every investment you make has impact, positive or negative. And we should be aware of them. Even if we choose to make financially first decisions, we should be aware of the possible negative impact that our investment is making. Okay, that's a fossil fuel investment. Let's try it with another thing. This time I want to go to the other end of the spectrum and use the Impact Equalizer to map making a grant to something that's really impactful. So we're going to make a grant to a community land trust that is growing food in an urban environment and is governed entirely by communities of color in the neighborhood. And so when we make a grant, we put money out into the world and we get a negative 100% return on our money. So when I put a grant out, I make a $100,000 grant, nothing comes back. That's negative 100% back on my money. If I got the 100,000 back, I would be getting a 0% return on my money. And if I got double it, right, 200,000 back, I'd be getting double my money. So we're getting a negative 100% return, but we're doing organic reclamation of waste in the city, and we have putting carbon back into the soil and growing food, huge environmental return. We've got a social return of growing food in a low-income neighborhood, as well as having it be inclusive of all kinds of communities, intergenerational families, et cetera. And it's a community land trust, so the structure of it is 100% governed by the community. So now we can see I'm getting this through the roof return on my ES and my G, and I'm getting negative 100% on my money. And I'm saying, you know what, that's worthwhile. I think that I'm getting enough return over here. And okay, maybe there's a little bit of risk somewhere, like it could be, this is definite, negative 100% is definite. Maybe they are not using all of the practices that we might like to see, and there's some fertilizer and pesticides used that slip in there. Or again, maybe the governance model falls apart. There's some risk, but essentially we're saying this is worth doing, and I'm willing to take the negative 100% on my money. But there's another way to do it. We are missing all the space. If you go to the fossil fuel one up here and negative here, and down here and all this positive return, there's all this space to play with in between. And the name of that is sometimes called full spectrum capital, where instead of I'm trying to maximize my financial return, or I'm just doing grants, this territory in between, the full spectrum from 0 to negative, like maybe getting 20 cents back on the dollar or 80 cents back on the dollar, that is territory for investing as well. So here's one more example. So the third example I want to use comes from my work at the Boston Impact Initiative, and we use the Impact Equalizer to make it very, very particular for our own use. And so we've renamed the ES and the G for what we're focused on. So particularly instead of environmental, we talk about specifically, we mean climate resilience. And for social, we're particularly focused on racial justice, which is the purpose of our fund. And for governance, we in particular mean new majority power. And by new majority, we're talking about the change in the country, the demographic change in the country to being a majority communities of color rather than majority white country by the year 2044, whenever it might be. And so we're talking about, these are the ES and the G that we're interested in. And I'll give you an example of making an investment in a worker-owned organic waste recycling cooperative. So we gave them a $100,000 loan at 3%. So on the financial dimension, I'm going to put a dot around the 3% return that we were expecting on this 5-year loan, but also recognize that it's an early stage enterprise. We were there for startup. This is just the next stage in. But it has a tremendous amount of risk in it. They're trying to break into a sector. They're trying to grow at an early stage. They have to cross what's sometimes called the valley of death, the chasm from startup to growth. And so we know that there is a lot of risk in this investment. We could lose all of our money. So we've got the possibility of a 3% return and the possibility of negative 100% return on our money. But this is a group that came together out of two grassroots organizing movements. There was a group, a Black Workers Alliance, that came together and a Latina Alliance that came together that had been advocating for economic power and decided instead of just doing policy and advocacy work, let's claim it by starting this enterprise. And so here is this enterprise in terms of climate resilience that is taking organic waste out of the community, picking up waste from restaurants and bodegas and other places and turning that into soil that can be used for growing food. And so we have a very, very high return on the environmental dimension. We have a very high return on the racial justice dimension. Again, Black and brown organizing groups coming together, paying themselves a living wage, making decisions together about what they need for their well-being as an enterprise. And so we're getting a very high return on racial justice. And again, because it's a worker-owned cooperative, which means that it's 100% governed by its workers, we're getting an enormously high return on the governance dimension, on building new majority power so that they can make decisions about how to pay themselves, how to give themselves benefits, how to care for their community. And so when we look at an investment like this, we're saying, well, yeah, we hope that we get that 3% return. but we're willing to take the risk on the financial dimension because we're going to get this impact return across our core impact metrics. So we consider this a bullseye on impact, and we don't actually see a lot of impact risk. The design of the enterprise has so much impact baked into its structure that, again, I'm not showing you a dimension of risk here. We think it's pretty reliable. We're going to get the expected climate returns, the expected racial justice returns, and the expected new majority power returns. So I offer this as a framework, as a way of thinking. Anytime that you're considering an investment, anytime you're looking at a portfolio of investments or a fund, thinking about the relationship, the interconnection between financial risk and return and impact risk and return across whatever dimensions you have. And you may want to customize those dimensions for what you care about most. But again, my objective is to bring to you the idea of holding complexity in your thinking every time you're engaged in some kind of type of financial transaction. Thank you.